Um, Welcome all of you to this webinar that is launching this initiative called the Shaping Inclusive Transition. Particularly today's theme of the webinar is powering community-driven just transitions. It's a pleasure to have all of you here today and my esteemed speakers for today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, we all acknowledge that climate change is real, and the impact that climate change is having on our communities is really becoming very prevalent at various levels. And so, and we have also increasingly seen that there's a real interest. Governments are starting to put strategies in place to drive the transition, to ensure that our communities and the economies can decouple from you know unsustainable practices that we all are aware of. But even more importantly, the transition is really meant to ensure that we can build resilience towards climate change. But the transition is not just a specific sector. It's supposed to be an economy-wide sector to ensure that no one is left behind. But oftentimes, what we have seen is that even though there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of interest in this space. It's not, a lot of these strategies are not really gaining traction on the ground, or if there are any resources, they're not really trickling faster enough to those communities, to those locations that most require some of these interventions. So it's really imperative that we have a bottom-up approach so that when we talk about the just energy, the just transition, or the transition to a much more greener, inclusive economy, everyone is on board. And more importantly, that the transition actually build resilient economies, build resilient households so that we can be able to respond to the impact of climate change. So really, this is the thinking that we have had around some of these issues. It really gives me an honor. So today's webinar, we were thinking really about four key objectives, and that's the lineup of the speakers that we have put in, really to explore how, from a financing perspective, because ultimately finance is what is needed to bring about change on the ground. How can climate finance uh, trickle better to the grassroots where really impact needs to happen? Secondly, how do we center the voices of communities, integrating their knowledge systems, lived experiences, in a way, so that you can be able to drive the transition as is needed. And thirdly, how do we showcase concrete examples of women, youth, and informal workers really leading the transition on the ground? Oftentimes, some of these things people talk about them, but they're really people who are already ahead of the game, so to speak. We want to be able to center those voices and ensure that they are brought along and to drive this transition. But even more importantly, for me, this webinar really and this convening is about how do we foster collaboration between different actors, between government, civil society, the private sector, because we will acknowledge that the kind of challenges that we face, they are wicked problems, and wicked problems cannot be solved in silos or in a way that uh, uh, it requires collaboration, and that's really what is needed in trying to drive this forward. So it's a pleasure to have all of you here. If you just joined in, my name is Dr. Mao Emis. I'm the founder and executive director of the African Center for Green Economy. We're a think tank that is based in South Africa, but work across the region. And this initiative that we are launching now is a collaboration between the center and the Southern Africa Trust, which is a group that is also, pushing climate justice quite a lot within the region. Before I welcome our first speaker on this webinar, I just would like to make one presentation, one slide showing what the shaping inclusive transition is all about and what we're trying to achieve over the years. Essentially, there are, I would say, like five key objectives to this initiative. One is to advance inclusive, community-driven approaches to the just transition. And that's really making it very inclusive, bottom up, and so on. But even more importantly, to bridge grassroots innovation, and national and regional policy frameworks. Because a lot of policy making tends to be top down and so on, yet it needs to be cultivated on the ground up. But even more importantly, we're hoping that this initiative will help to support real economy solutions that can create jobs, that can improve people's livelihood, because ultimately that is what is really needed to bring about the kind of change that is expected. But even more importantly, I think that we need to amplify our voices of communities on a whole range of issues, including climate finance, just transition decision making, policy making at the highest level, and to foster learning, because ultimately knowledge sharing across region, across stakeholders is really going to be quite critical in advancing the just transition. Everyone must be on board. So these are like the major objectives. But if we think about it, in the next couple of months, what we're really trying to achieve with this initiative is that our vision for this is really that we want to build a just, inclusive, and whole economic transition, and that is led by communities. That centers communities at the centers communities really into the central anchor the transition, and that is anchored in what we call community-based, platforms, local hubs that are driving the innovation, coordinating at the grassroots level, and linking that to real economy solutions. And we're talking about jobs, enterprises, and systems for 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 transformation. There are really four key strategic pillars. I'm not going to go into too much details, but the one, like I mentioned earlier, is about community platforms. And these are the idea here is that these kind of platforms, they could be virtual or real, but hosted by communities, driven by communities, whether it's CBOs, youth networks, traditional councils, and so on at the local level, and real economy solutions, looking at things like sectors that could promote the transition, like regenerative agriculture, circular economy, opportunities for job creation at the grassroots level. But even and related to that is about participatory policy engagement. How do we make sure that grassroots communities actually drive these policy changes that are required and are very central to the conversations about the just transition, and how the just transition need to be anchored in the broader context around the transition, and to document, capture lessons, stories, and impact, because ultimately we believe that by storytelling is when you're going to be able to make the kind of difference that is needed. We're building various platforms to push that initiative, and I'm looking forward to engaging with all of you, whether you're other entrepreneurs working in this space, community-based organizations, policymakers, to shape how this platform moves forward, but more importantly, to kind of create the impact that is required. We'll be sharing more information as we document this journey, inviting all of you to be part of this journey as we move forward, whether as from your community or as a policy maker and so on, to kind of shape the discourse. So that's really it about the SIT, which is Shaping Inclusive Transitions project. We don't see this as a project, but we see this as a platform that is ongoing. So it's not something that is going to happen only for 12 months. We see it as an ongoing convening, ongoing initiatives that are really driven on the ground by activists. And the lineup of today's speakers really speak to some of these key issues that we have tried to outline here. And on that note, I would like to then introduce our first speaker, who is Neil Cole. Neil Cole is the finance manager at the presidency, in charge of the Just Energy transition. I see he has dropped off the call now. Um, 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 Neil Cole just dropped off the call. I don't know what happened there. Uh, oh yeah, he's back. Um, Neil, I would like to welcome you to come and to give your, input into this discussion. It's really a pleasure having you in today's session, and your experience in driving these country platforms is going to be really instrumental. So, share with us what value do you think the country platforms bring, and why do you think it's very important for this bottom-up approach to kind of meet what is actually happening at the national level? Thank you, Neil.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And apologies for the call ending. Not too sure what happened, but thank you very much for the introduction. And good afternoon, colleagues and friends. It is indeed an honor to join you today for the convening of a diverse group of stakeholders from both government and from grassroots organizations, and a convening to explore how top-down, bottom-up frameworks can genuinely center community voices, knowledge, and as well as needs. And this, in many ways, is recognizing that the matching of the top-down and bottom-up is what we should be aiming for. I want to thank the African Center for Green Economy and the Southern Africa Trust for convening this critical conversation on what it truly means to power community-driven transitions. At the heart of South Africa's just energy transition is a simple but powerful idea. And that idea is that we cannot transform our energy system unless we also transform the lives of the people that are most affected by that system. The JET investment plan, which I've had the privilege of supporting through the project management unit in the presidency, recognizes this principle. It is not just a climate plan, it is a development plan, one that must work for the people of Mpumalanga and more broadly, the people of South Africa. Mpumalanga in particular, because that is where the coal economy is deeply entrenched. One that must create new opportunities, especially for women, youth, and informal workers, and one that must ensure that no community is left behind. But I think we need to be honest also. A just transition cannot be and is not a line item in a budget or a paragraph in a policy document. A just transition is political, economic, and social, right? And it's about the processes connected to each one of those. And I think we need to acknowledge that it will only succeed on how well we are able to listen, how bravely we act, and how consistently we put people at the center. I think failure to do that is going to seriously undermine our ability to undertake a successful transition. And I think this is why community leadership is not just a nice to have, it is essential. It is also why platforms like the SIT are so important. These platforms help us bridge the gap between top-down planning and bottom-up realities and how the needs are expressed from the bottom up. They create space for traditional knowledge, for local wisdom, and for lived experiences to shape national decisions. As the JET PMU, we have a mandate to coordinate the implementation of South Africa's JET investment plan. It's a plan that is being costed at more than 1.5 trillion in investments that are going to be needed over the next 5 years. And it's investments across electricity infrastructure, new industries, municipalities, skills, and importantly, community development. And that's a big task, but we are under no illusion. The size of the financing means nothing if it does not deliver tangible benefits in people's lives. We are now working with partners to finance and implement the Just Energy Transition Investment Plan in the areas of skills development zones in Mpumalanga. And this is anchored and will be anchored by TVET colleges and local employers to equip coal workers and youth with the skills to thrive in the green economy. Secondly, and very importantly, as I've mentioned, community-driven project pipelines, and this will be supported by the recently established JET funding platform, an innovative mechanism platform to match grantees with grantors, and to place that at the heart of the National Investment Program. And then through the updated Accelerating Coal Transition Investment Plan, we have a dedicated focus on how to repurpose coal towns and also dignity by creating jobs, restoring ecosystems, and building local resilience. So these are some of the plans that are underway, some at the infancy, others have moved on a little bit more. But we still have a long way to go. We need to ensure that we break down the barriers that make it hard for grassroots organizations to access finance. And this is one of the central roles that we are planning for the funding platform. We need to ensure transparency and accountability so that communities can track progress and also hold institutions to account. And this is going to be essential if we are to achieve distributive justice, procedural justice, and restorative justice. And then fundamentally, we need to build trust, because a just transition without trust is just a transition, right? And we're not really caring how we come out of that transition once it is undertaken. So friends, in conclusion, this transition is a once in a generation opportunity to reimagine our energy future and to rewrite the social contract in places that have been overlooked for far too long. Let us rise to this moment with humility, with urgency, and with the communities, particularly of Mpumalanga and beyond, guiding our way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil, for an excellent overview and making the business case, so to speak, for for the just transition and why these country platforms are really very important. One of the things you said for me, like, there is that the just transition is not just a line item, something that is a work in progress that you have to meditate and make sure that you figure it out and it works so well. And also for me, the other thing that resonates very strongly amidst all the stuff you've said is this idea of trust, that you really need to build trust in the system so that everyone can come along, so people can believe in this system and can commit into this process. One of my favorite quotations, I don't know from which book I read, that trust is the currency of the new economy. A lot of transactions happen only because of trust. So we need to nurture trust, especially in this space where we're dealing with wicked problems that no one solution can solve them all. So really appreciate your insights, Neil, for gracing this opportunity. Just to the participants, we're not taking questions now. If you have any questions, you can drop it in the chat box there, or when the time comes, we can open up with a Q&A session for people to participate. It takes me now to welcome Ms. Makoma Lekalaka, who is the Lekalakala. I'm so sorry, madam. Who is the director of Earth Life Africa. She's also a member of the Presidential Climate Commission. For me, Makoma represents really the kind of energy that is required to foster community participation in this space, and to agitate for the rights of those who are going to be most impacted by climate change. So really, thank you for your time to join us. The platform is yours. Share with us, why do you think community participation is really critical in shaping the just transition in South Africa, and whether we're actually making progress or not. Welcome, Makoma.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Listening to Cole, to Neil, I think some of the points that he brings up are those that we continuously have discussions around. And I am confident that since he brings up those points, this is something that would be taken up seriously. But before, I think what we need to remind ourselves about is that for time immemorial, communities have been at the forefront of protecting their livelihoods. And that's where the transition has been taking place. It's not, there's a buzzword now of the just transition that everybody talks about, but this is something that has been being implemented or being experienced or being done by communities for quite a long time. And communities have taken place in protecting their biodiversity, which is embedded in their cultures, traditions, and heritage. So linking their everyday struggles to climate justice, it's also linking their everyday struggles to a climate resilience. But what is important that is linked to the topic today is what can be done. I think a collaborative approach across sectors, it's quite important. Respect for all. It's something that needs to be done because it's something that is not coming up or emerging, since most of the time we find there's a top-down approach. Decisions are made for grassroots organizations and not with them. So you find that ordinary communities are left out in decision making or in discussions that are shaping their future, which is highly problematic. And that is why you find people sometimes doubting this transition or the just transition. And for quite a long time, communities have come together and have developed what is called an open agenda. And that open agenda is an agenda that what communities have put across is that for us to be able to achieve a just transition, it will be important that there is inclusivity, there is solidarity, there is an open decision, an open democratic debate in decision making. And that when those debates take place, then we need to take into consideration issues around class, around race, around gender. Currently, what we see, which is something that also Neil has alluded to, is that those that, let's say the elite, those that have that so-called academic and scientific theoretical knowledge are the ones that are deciding what needs to happen. And they leave the people that are going to be most impacted outside of that. And we've seen that the people would always throw out that there's important that there's a gender responsive on the just transition, or that workers need to be involved in the just transition discussions or decision-making processes. But all in all, I would say that people have been trying by all means to come together. And that's why when the Life After Coal, which Earthlife is part of, Groundwork is part of, the Center for Environmental Rights, that we have brought communities together, we had said that it's important that we have a continuous discussions with those that are experiencing or that would really want to improve their lives further than where they are today. And the just transition for us, it's not only about moving from a a fossil fueled energy generation to a much more cleaner energy generation. It's also about what people are going through on an everyday basis, the impacts that people are feeling. So we feel that this open agenda on the just transition should also include features like how people are impacted, how do we change, how do we come to food security, because these are the impacts also of climate change and the health impact of the current business as usual of doing things. But I think the thing is that what is at the bottom is, I think, time to talk. There's been a lot of dialogues, a lot of discussions, and action has been minimal. Yes, we've got so much good on paper, which I think we appreciate very much, all of us. Although what is good on paper has not been developed, or ordinary people have not been involved in putting that in paper to say, this is how we see it, how we shape the transition. So that procedural justice that Neil spoke about, it's quite important. But I think the important thing that we can get from ordinary people is how we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, and how do we improve their lives currently, and that restorative justice is priority, because we see that not happening. And the more we talk is the more we must act. We should not just talk about what not needs to happen. We also need to change the situation, improve people's lives, and people should benefit from that. It's not only there's a domino effect of the transition, and so that domino effect would need to include everyone so that we can realize a just transition to a low economic development. And at the center of this, it's women who have been the champions of the transition, from their actions in their households, how they manage energy efficiency, how they preserve food, how they plan for uncertain future. And these are the people that should be at the center either of policy development or legislation, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are bearing the brunt of just talk and no action at all. Thank you.
Oh, wow. What an elaborate summary of what needs to happen. It's like you have read our theory of change in this SIT initiative and articulated it very, very well. And for me, the things that resonate very well in your statement, one is that, women are the champions of the just transition on the ground, and they've been doing that for a very long time. They are not only the most vulnerable, but they are the core face of pushing this innovation. So it's really centering, those vulnerable groups. For me, I think it's like one of the most important tasks that we would need to achieve. And also you alluded to the fact that oftentimes, to the broader notion of elite capture, where, it's that those of us, the educated, the well-connected, ultimately are the ones that are making decisions on behalf of communities. And one of the things we have talked a lot about in the SIT initiative is like, we don't want to see communities as traditionally framed as beneficiaries of initiatives of progress, but communities must be the co-creators. They must be the champions. They have to be at the forefront, not someone designing solutions somewhere and saying, this group of people are the beneficiaries. They need to own those process. So I think this kind of conversations is really, really very, very important. And just on that note, I would like to then hand over to my good friend for many years and one of the interesting young ladies who are working on the ground, innovating, and just really showing that you could be a woman, you could be in a rural location, but still be able to rise to the top. So Kia Hoti is a founder, and she's the founder of the Lamo Fuel, which is a company based in the Northwest Province that manufactures biodiesel. We have been working with Kia since 2017 at our center, as she's one of the entrepreneurs we have mentored over the years, and it really gives me so much pleasure to see how she has grown, year by year. So Kia, thank you for gracing this platform. I will give you the opportunity to make your remarks and to share for us your journey of what it means to run an enterprise in a rural context, in a finance constrained landscape, and so on. How are you able to overcome some of these barriers, and where do you think the voices of young people need to come on board in terms of these conversations? So thank you, Kia.
Thank you, Dr. Maya. Good afternoon, everyone, and also acknowledgement to our distinguished speakers. I'm honored to be a partaker of this platform today. We live in a world where climate change is not just a scientific challenge, it's a human challenge. And no group feels its impact more directly or has greater impact to solve it than young people. And as Dr. Maya has said, young people or young entrepreneurs are the key drivers in the green economy, establishing and leading green businesses like myself. And young people or young innovations are crucial in developing effective climate solutions and ensuring a just and equitable transition. Young people, we offer fresh perspective, technological advancement, and a strong commitment to sustainability. And therefore, young people will live the long-term consequences of climate change. And therefore, we need to look at the barriers that we face as young people. We need to look at to building more responsive support systems and the role of local leadership that it plays. And just as an inspiring example from Lamofuel, when we started off in the Northern Cape, in the rural areas, we didn't have a lot of support. We started off in 2014. And unfortunately, in the climate and clean technology spaces, they are often dominated by male or older voices. And like Melika Lala said, the elite and the academics. So we face a lot of gender bias as a woman. We lack access to a lot of things, and there are a lot of interlinked systems that close doors to opportunities. For young women in the rural areas, there are cultural expectations. From a young age, we are discouraged to pursuing high-risk entrepreneurial ventures in a male-dominated sectors. I mean, even today, my family doesn't even quite comprehend what I do. And even from a young age, even ECD level, you will not see young girls encouraged to become engineers. And so of late, we are seeing that also age is catching up with us. Policies are not including us beyond 35 years. And we also face those structural factors where it's a work and family conflict. Women are supposed to take care of homes and be at home at the same time. We don't have that instrumental social ties for influence and advancement. Or we're not included in the decision-making spaces. So young women or young people in general are less likely to own land. Young people are less likely to own infrastructure. Even when we have these bright ideas that come together, it takes a long time. We took a very long time to bring our idea to life. We started in 2014 when I was only 26 years old, and we still had to compete against gender stereotypes. We still have to compete even today against supply chain and procurement practices that are favorable to men and bigger businesses that are already established. And in the rural areas, there are no mentors as well. There are no people that are supporting and no industry networks. So we're also experiencing spatial inequalities where we have to come to the city to be able to gain access to innovation hubs, to resources. And therefore, that also puts young people or young rural women at a disadvantage. We have also seen power dynamics coming into place with funders where there are issues of transparency and accountability, like Mr. Neil said earlier on. that are these programs really designed for women? Do they really have impact? Is there someone who's really measuring the desired impact on the investment that has been put on? And also, new dynamics are coming with lack of training. Like they said, people that are already in the academics and elite have a better chance. But these new dynamics include that lack of training within small business hinders funding opportunities. Funders now require people to be trained. When you come as a business into the space and you don't have any formal training, they take it as lack of credibility and that you don't know your story. So we also had to go through that, and we thank God for programs like what Dr. Mayo is running that helped us to even rethink of our model, reshape our models, and that has enabled us to participate in pitching events all across various stakeholders and lended funding from private sector. And from that, we were able to build a small plant in Kuruman. And only then did people start looking at us. Only then did more stakeholders show interest, even from the local leadership perspective. It's only when we started having that proof of concept, then leadership and government showed interest in what we're doing. And like Dr. Neil said earlier on about the just transition, the portfolios that they have there, skills are very critical enablers in coordinating this whole thing. Without the skills, without us being able to position ourselves well, we will not be able to meet the requirements of what is required of us. And so we're thinking we need to rethink of how financing and technical support can be more responsive to women and youth-led innovations. We're currently seeing there are a lot of tailored green funds that are coming, international green funds that are operating in South Africa, aiming to support the transition to a green economy through innovation and high impact projects. But as well, those are very high impact projects that people get to participate in. And at a local level, we do not have the competitive advantage to compete with those high impact projects. And these funds, they attract both public and private investment. And therefore, the role of local leadership comes in place there, that there needs to be funding that is matching local partners, that is designed and implemented to include the community, include small things like contract financing, purchase order, and include also hybrid tools, because you'd find that we apply for funding, but we don't have tools to track even those funds, to track the progress, to track even the management systems within the businesses, e-commercial solutions as we are going digital of late. So at Lamofil, we are a true example of how an inclusive ecosystem looks like, from getting support from private sector, local government, and being able to open doors for more collaborative activities within our local space, with other entrepreneurs outside of our province and just in the bigger picture of South Africa. And with that, we have been able to have impact where we create jobs for local people where resources are scarce. So we've created 11 jobs where 4 are permanent and 7 are temporary. And we've collected waste that has been able to boost the local economy, and also through that, collecting waste, turning it into renewable energy has helped us to also open other entrepreneurial opportunities where we have waste collectors, where we have distribution, and where we have packaging, and we also have suppliers of chemicals that we use. So we really need to see that inclusive ecosystems come to power and they work for young people and women. Thank you.
Wow, Kia, I could listen to you all day, elaborating some of the challenges that you go through as an entrepreneur. But if there's anything I can say, Kia, to you is, your resilience in this space. I remember when we first started engaging with you, I think 2017, you had a very little baby, but you still showed up for our events and led from the front. And I'm not surprised that you're still in there. It just takes a lot to be able to build a business. And someone said here, a lot of the challenges that you have outlined are actually systemic challenges, and most of them are macro challenges, and really speaks to the fact that um, some of the changes that are required are basically an economy-wide changes, whether it's from a policy perspective and so on, really things that oftentimes as an entrepreneur, you might not be able to address it only yourself, but really ecosystem players like us have become very important in kind of like surfacing some of those challenges so that right decision makers like Milcom can can champion it for you in those spaces where decisions are made about funding allocation, prioritizing initiatives, and things like that. To the audience, I encourage you once more to drop your questions in the chat there. We will come to them during the Q&A session. It would be lovely if you could also introduce yourself. I would really appreciate that. One of my colleagues, Wasila, she's online. She will collate them, and when we go to the Q&A section, we will we'll respond to them. I would like us to switch gear a little bit here. Like I said, that the challenges we face are multi-sectoral. It's not a solution that only entrepreneurs can address, or people in civil society, or government. We also need the academia, the private sector on board. And the academia is really important in kind of surfacing the types of tools, the kind of knowledge systems that are really required to accelerate the transition and making sure that everyone is brought along. So it gives me so much pleasure to welcome Professor Hassan Kaya. Professor Hassan Kaya is the director of the DST Center of Excellence in Indigenous Knowledge Systems in the University of KwaZulu-Natal. I've known Professor for a while now, and really for me, the intersection between indigenous knowledge systems and the just transition is extremely important. Like Makoma said earlier on, women and our communities are already at the forefront of the transition. They're already doing things. Oftentimes, when you come with these new terminologies, just transition or sustainable development and so on, it appears very elitist. Yet, if you look at these communities on the ground, many of them have already developed those mechanisms, tools, systems that are really, helping them to develop resilience at the ground, and really acknowledging the importance of those systems, those indigenous knowledge systems and so on, become really, really important. And so this project, we're working with Professor Kaya to try and see how do we find a synergy between harnessing those indigenous knowledge systems and using those resources, capacities to drive the just transition. So, Professor Kaya, welcome. It's your time to make your remarks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to share my presentation. I don't know whether.
Yeah, it's possible. Just
Can you see
it? Share your screen. That should be fine.
Can you see it?
Not yet. Maybe it's still coming.
Yeah, trying to see. I don't know. I mean, as Professor Mao said, my name is Hassan Kaya. I'm the director of the. Can you see the presentation?
Not yet, Prof. Did you press the share button? There's a green button.
Yes, I did.
Maybe it's still coming. I haven't seen it yet. I wonder if it's.
I pressed the share button here. So they say send a request. I don't know.
Oh, say send a request. I don't. Can you send a request? I don't know. It looks like you're not.
Yeah, okay, send a request.
Allow. Yeah, I think it says allow.
Is it okay now?
Yes. You can put it on.
Can everybody see it?
Yes, you can put it on presentation mode. Yeah, you can see indigenous knowledge systems in just transitions and governance pathways. So if you just put in presentation mode, we will be able to see it. The
Okay.
PowerPoint as presentation mode. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Prof. Go ahead.
You can see it?
Yes, you can see it. I can see it on my side, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, thank you very much. As you introduced me before, my name is Hassan Kaya. I'm the director of the DES, Department of Science, Technology, Innovation, National Research Foundation Center of Excellence in Indigenous Knowledge Systems. And we are also coordinating the African Institute in Indigenous Knowledge Systems, which is a consortium now of almost 30 higher education and autonomous research institutions within and outside the continent. And it covers all the linguistic regions of the continent. So one aspect to which I wanted to contribute today to the discussion is the role of our indigenous knowledge systems. And here I also include issues of languages and our homegrown philosophies in the promoting and protecting our environmental justice, and also goes within the question of just, not as Lekala said, it's not just a question of energy. It goes across all other aspects of our life in terms of food security, water management, and all aspects of life. And also the issue of governance becomes very important in the sense that all these transitions we're talking about need to be managed or governed properly. And also another important aspect, Lekala pointed, is the question of the role of women. Women are the custodians of our local knowledge systems, as the main subsistence farmers or producers. At the same time, they are the caregivers, both at family level and also at community level. So the issue of just transition cannot succeed without the role of women. I don't know whether, let me make it bigger myself here. No, the moment becomes a bit challenging here. Perhaps you can help me with the
Are you able to
making
move the
it
next
bigger.
slide? If you want, don't move the next slide. Do you just want to click the arrow to move the next slide?
Yeah, but I also need to see it myself here in it.
Oh, shame. I'm not
Yes,
sure how that
because the
works.
screen is the screen bigger there the way you see it.
No, it depends on the person. For me, it's not big.
Yeah, so that's why I'm trying to see how do I make the thing here bigger. It's a bit of a technical challenge. The movement also here. Becomes a challenge here.
Are you not able to see the text, Prof?
Yes, I can see text, but it's smaller. So I wanted
shame. So
to be more interactive by.
Yeah.
So okay, I just talked the issues, but I wanted it to be, I don't know which one here should be bigger here.
Okay. How about that? I can see you.
Yeah, but I wanted this thing here, this thing, the challenge. Can you see it now?
Yeah, I can see the introduction a bit smaller, but
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. I think I can also move it. So
Yeah.
the question is the issue of just transitions and also the issue of gender, and especially the importance of our local knowledge systems. And I also say the issue of language, indigenous languages, is very important if at all the just transition is to be inclusive, and also the issue of governance is intertwined concept, which are crucial in the navigating the complex shift towards sustainable and equitable future, especially in the context of climate and green economies. And as the past presenters pointed out, the issue of just transition, especially in the context of climate change and environmental sustainability, seeks to ensure that nobody is left behind. I think that's the most important thing in all transitions, whether it's in the issues of energy or the issues of food security, issues of peace building, nobody should be left behind. And also within the context of green economies is to ensure that we are very much environmentally conscious, to ensure that whatever we do, there is environmental justice, which ensure that those marginalized communities, especially women and children, disabled, are not affected in those transitions. So the key principles of just transition involve the question of social dialogue, that there must be issues of communication becomes important, and also the question of decent work to ensure that those in the process of the just transition that nobody is affected in terms of uh, decent work and also in terms of skill development, economic diversification, all those processes which are part and parcel of the just transition ensure that everybody is included and is not left behind. And also when you come to the question of governance, that all these processes and intricacies should ensure that they are governed properly, and the issue of decision making should be as inclusive as possible, and to ensure that all sectors of society are included. And when it comes to the question of environmental governance, specifically refers to the process whereby decision making involves all aspects of the community of society, and also ensure that everybody has a say or a participation in decision making, which involves the issues of environment and also the issue of natural resources. Another important aspect in the question of indigenous knowledge system, the importance of indigenous knowledge system is the question that, especially the issue of indigenous languages, that they are not just there for communication, they are also repositories of knowledge. And you find that women also play a very big part in the question of ensure that our indigenous languages as repositories of knowledge in the context of climate resilience and sustainability, they are also actively involved in different ways, because they say it's through the indigenous languages, and also our homegrown philosophies that we have a symbiotic relationship between us as human and the environment and the importance of it. So the issue of climate change mitigation is also ensure that indigenous knowledge has important aspects, especially in issues of early warning systems that in most local communities over the years, because knowledge, the indigenous knowledge be developed over the years, and in the process of the intersymbiotic relationship between the natural environment, culture, language, and other aspects of life, people have developed different ways of early warning system and indicators within the context of climate change. And also the indigenous knowledge is also used in issues of water management, in issues of subsistence farming, and also new ways of doing things with the context of the environment, and also in the disaster preparedness. People in their particular ecosystems, in the particular cultural backgrounds, they have developed knowledge systems to adapt, mitigate, and also to create a climate resilience. The challenges in the harnessing of indigenous knowledge in climate resilience and sustainability is the fact that most of the indigenous knowledge systems, including languages and their contribution to climate resilience and adaptation and sustainability, have not very much been documented. And most of the knowledge across generations is already transmitted, and that's why later on I'll come to the question, well, how do we leverage frontier technologies, including artificial intelligence, to ensure that the knowledge which has been generated, including the languages and our homegrown philosophies, are shared across generations and also outside our local communities, so they contribute to the sustainable solutions in the global knowledge economy with the context of global challenges. But there are also issues of ethical considerations in terms of intellectual property, that most of this knowledge is being expropriated or is being by outsiders, is not respected, and we must find a mechanism to ensure that in the just transition, especially in the context of gender and other marginalized communities or members of society, in terms of also class, is the color pointed, that are also taken into consideration within the context of the fact that nobody is left behind. And also another challenge is this question of interfacing or integration between traditional knowledge systems and modern science or Western science to ensure that the interface does not also marginalize local knowledge and value systems, including languages. So there are challenges in the process of integrating IKS in the climate resilience and sustainability strategies. So all these challenges, ethical considerations, the issues of integration, the biases needs to be also governed and mitigated. And also indigenous knowledge are crucial in the just transition in the question that they also contribute to the question of decolonization, recognition of the rights of marginalized community members and social groups, and also indigenous knowledge as local community-based knowledge system is important in the issue of self-determination, sovereignty of local communities and also local and marginalized communities, especially the issue of gender is very important. And also the question of respect to indigenous ways of life is an important aspect in just transitions and governance to ensure that local knowledge systems in the process of change from one stage to another are also respected and taken into consideration. And also important of indigenous knowledge, including languages, especially within the context of the green economy and entrepreneurship, is that holistic role of indigenous knowledge that does not things in isolation. It takes things in a holistic way, and also the concept of good living, which is also articulated in different cultural and ecosystems within the continent, outside the continent, where philosophies in Southern Africa here, the Ubuntu aspect, which emphasizes collective well-being and harmonious relationship between humans and their immediate environment to ensure that there is sustainability in the just transition. And also important aspect of IKS is time-tested solutions in the sense that people have been using indigenous knowledges and languages over periods of time. They've tested them in the actual situations over time. They know what works, what does not work, and why there is need also to involve other knowledge systems from outside, including technologies, to ensure that the process becomes just and also is governed properly. There is also an issue that indigenous knowledge helps us to protect not only the biodiversity, also by a cultural, spiritual diversity, and especially also the issue of women also becomes important as the custodians of this knowledge system. And also the question of equitable distribution of benefit and burdens, ensure that that's why you participated, Professor Moore, in our workshop which ended yesterday to ensure the question of caregivers. Women are the caregivers, but they're neglected. Their contribution to the economy is not paid, is not recognized, but we must ensure that there's equal benefits and the sharing of burdens in the process of just transition. And also all the efforts we are doing in this just transition and inclusiveness, that policies and governance issues are also taken into consideration. So the essence of significance of IKS, including languages and home growth philosophy in the just transition lies in the fact that they provide a moral and ethical compass in the whole process. They offer practical place-based solutions, and that's a question of relevance in the sense the cultural place-based nature of IKS is important in the question of relevance. Policies should also take into consideration the issues of culture, the issues of ecosystem, the issues of gender, and the other imperatives which ensure that nobody is left behind. So, important aspect, as I pointed out, that no knowledge can solve all the solutions or the challenges in the global knowledge economy or what we're facing. And that we need also to ensure that indigenous knowledge systems, including languages and homegrown philosophies, interface with other knowledge and technology systems. And we should find ways in which that we leverage on these knowledge systems, or what some people call it frontier technologies, to ensure that we increase the efficiency and the relevance of our homegrown philosophies, including our knowledge systems. And there are also challenges in the process of leveraging these frontier technologies, the epistemological, methodological issues, which because of time, I want to go deeper into that one. There are issues of language barriers and language loss, because as the environment is being affected, things we used to know when they plant the animal or the insect get lost, means the language is also lost, and those who come after us won't be able to know what that thing looks like, or that animal or plant or insect looks like. There is also the issue of cultural sensitivity, and that is one of the biggest debates we're having in the academia and also in the knowledge discourse, that the digital technologies, the emerging technologies, they are not cultural or ideological neutral. So we must ensure that they are also being scrutinized, well discussed, to ensure that they don't continue the historical mistrust or the past injustices which our societies and especially the marginalized social groups and communities ensured. There are also issues of funding and investment models. You have problems of the digital device. A lot of our people, although we want them to participate in the technological revolutions, but they have no access to internet, to energy sources, whatever there. So we must ensure that the issue of funding and investment models are also within the context of a just transition and governance. And also that's the same thing, we must ensure that the enhanced innovation and resilience that these digital technologies or frontier technologies, we should ensure that they enhance innovation and resilience within the context of indigenous knowledge systems. They also contribute to developing unique green products and services, especially among the young people. You'll find that they have a lot of skills and knowledge of digital technologies, but we must also take advantage to ensure that they transform our indigenous natural resources, cultural resources, spiritual resources into unique green products and services which can contribute to sustainable livelihood in the community and also in the global knowledge economy. And also the issue of empowerment and self-determination, and that's also bringing again that that's what we are busy now working with the UN to ensure that the green innovations, green economy, entrepreneurship takes into consideration of care giving, especially with those women who tend to be marginalized, and their contribution at home as caregivers in the family and the society is not also marginalized, neglected also in the issues of national income, computation, whatever there, to ensure that women are empowered in their innovation and contribution to national agenda, part of the just transition. And the issue of policy becomes also very important to ensure that policy development becomes inclusive and also takes into consideration the question of investment and also contribution that the most important aspect of indigenous knowledge and languages, they assist in the domestication of sustainable development goals, that they take the cultural and place-based nature of indigenous knowledge to ensure that sustainable development, all the 17 sustainable development are localized or they are domesticated and become relevant. So indigenous knowledge also in the process of just transition and governance, they need to be protected to prevent issues of piracy. A lot of our knowledge system in the communities are being stolen, exploited, and there is no beneficiation for those who are knowledge producers. Ensure that the genuine participation, free prior consent before you take the knowledge, and the whole thing is ensure that nobody is left behind, and there is question of justice. And one of the colleagues there pointed out the question of trust, to ensure there is a trust between the knowledge producers in the process of sharing and the other aspect. And also another important aspect is that the question of IKS, indigenous languages, provide the continent with special resources or special unique resources which can contribute to sustainable development and which is also relevant, localized, and has a meaning within the context of climate action and other aspects. So local cultural institutions play an incredible part although they underestimated in the question that they help very much to revitalize indigenous knowledge systems and contribute to green economies and entrepreneurship, which is inclusive and which is also gender sensitive, taking the young people across to ensure that their knowledge in terms of skills and knowledge, digital technologies contribute to sustainable life. I think I should stop there. Thank you. Yeah.
Elaborate unpacking of the opportunities of the importance of IKS and how we could potentially mainstream IKS in this space. And for me, I really do think that if we are to think about just transition as a bottom-up issue, we have to consider all of these issues that you have outlined here, whether it's documenting our knowledge systems, IP issues, but even more importantly, you introducing the idea of the care economy and the burden of unpaid work which is disproportionately affecting women and their ability to effectively participate in the broader economy. But even more importantly, our economic models, whether it's statistics, recognizing that unpaid care work is actually making a contribution to the broader economy. Ladies and gentlemen, I think now we have hopefully, jogged your thoughts and memories and so on. It's the time to open it up for questions and inputs, but I just like to put one speaker on the spot here. What I will never emphasize so much about this initiative we're undertaking is that this is not necessarily a South African initiative, it's a regional initiative. Obviously, South Africa has made quite a bit of advance in terms of the just transition and so on, but we see South Africa as an anchor, hoping to, take it to the rest of the region, but more importantly, collaborate, learn together with whatever is happening in the region. So I'm just going to Tandiswa. Tandiswa is she's in the audience. Tandiswa, I hope you don't mind me putting you on the spot. She's the coordinator for women and land in Zimbabwe. I just wanted to just give a few, minutes take in terms of what is that you're actually doing in Zimbabwe at the moment and how these issues around convention, around just transition, you think will shape the way things are done on the ground. If you are up for it, so if you still want to gather your thoughts, it's fine. But I will also open up any other questions. If you want to ask a question, you raise your hand, and then we will unmute you. I don't know if you have the capability of unmuting yourself on that side. But I also do see that there are some questions within the chat. Wasila, my colleague, do you like to read out those questions just to be sure that we
Yes.
respond them? Yes, go ahead.
So we have a question from Damale. Damale says she's listening from Uganda, and her question is directed to Dr. Kaya. Damale says, I am interested in hearing your thoughts and opinion on the extent to which indigenous knowledge has been embedded in South Africa's just transition plan. If yes, what has been the contribution so far?
Yeah, can I react to that one?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Prof.
Yeah, I think I'm taking from our own center here in indigenous knowledge systems and also within the context of the institute. We are working very closely with the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation within the context of what we call that the National System of Innovation to ensure that indigenous knowledge, local community-based knowledge system, whether it's in traditional medicine, whether in issues of water, management system, what they also contribute. For instance, we have a project here called the recognition of peer learning to ensure that local knowledge systems, especially we started with traditional medicine and also traditional leadership. We also have about 16 disciplines of competence to ensure, which involve issues of farming, agriculture, and other aspects of society, to ensure that indigenous knowledge is active, especially the indigenous knowledge holders, and especially women in particular, are actively involved in all the activities, or indigenous knowledge is recognized. And one important aspect is since 2004, the government of South Africa has the indigenous knowledge system policy. And we, as in the higher education, we've been given the custodian to develop the critical mass of human capital, which is conversant with indigenous knowledge, ways of knowing, research methodologies, world views, and all to ensure that in our institutions, when we are teaching or we are involved in research, indigenous knowledge holders are actively involved, especially women, and to ensure that in the process of development, sustainable development, nobody is left behind. So the knowledge also these knowledge holders have is recognized. We work together with the South African Qualification Authority to ensure that the norms and standards of the different knowledge holders in the 16 disciplines of competence are matched together with the formal ways of recognizing knowledge systems and ways of doing things. So those are also in 2019, South Africa now has the IKS Act, which involves the issues of intellectual property, the issues of recognition of power learning, and other aspects to ensure that nobody is left behind. And the knowledge systems, local knowledge systems, where the majority of our people, South Africa here and the rest of the continent in the developing world depend on, are actively involved in all sustainable development initiatives, including the localization, as I pointed out, of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So there are a lot of policy and legal imperatives which are done in the country, and also South Africa becomes a model for other parts of the continent to ensure that what is done here in terms of policy imperatives, legal imperatives, other African countries also can also integrate in their development plan as part of the just transition.
Thank you, Professor. Much appreciated for a comprehensive response. There's a question for Neil, and then I'll go to you, Tandiwe. To Neil, do you think SAS JET IP allocates sufficient financing to skills development and training? Neil, there seems to be quite a bit of interest in responding to that question.
Well, thank you very much. But if I can maybe
yeah, I can hear you.
The earlier question that the prof has already addressed quite comprehensively. I think to just say that more direct that the JET doesn't meaningfully include indigenous knowledge systems, right? But it is a plan, and with these plans, they evolve. And the way that we are going about implementation is to co-create and to co-create the implementation approaches alongside relevant institutions, communities, and other related stakeholders. I think the fact that we have built-in principles in the JET of social inclusion, particularly of workers and vulnerable communities, and also the extensive stakeholder engagement that we have, including civil society, there are several opportunities to bring in local knowledge in the way that we co-create our implementation approaches, and also in the way that we may further bring about changes to the implementation plan as we go along, as we learn, and a lot of that learning comes from the communities that we work with. On the skills question, so the JET PMU has been very forthright in our public statements that as we realize the full extent of the skills deficit in relation to the greening of the economy, in relation to both those workers that transition out and those workers that transition in, that we have underestimated the financing need. But let me just qualify that and say that, it's not like there is a budget of 1.5 trillion that is sitting somewhere, right? What we did with the investment plan is to determine an indicative financing requirement. So once again, coming back to this idea of evolving plans, as we set up the JET skills desk, that will be located at the Department of Higher Education and Training, a more accurate sense of what is going to be required, who is going to be carrying that out across universities, TVET colleges, and other training centers, etc. We will get a better sense of the financing requirement, a financing requirement that would come from the budget, would come from our international partners, and also from corporate South Africa and other philanthropies. Thank you.
Thank you, Neil. Tandiwe, can you unmute yourself to make your contributions? And then I will respond to one question there in the chat box. Tandiwe, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Good afternoon. My name is Tandiwe Chidawarume. I'm with Women in Land in Zimbabwe, and we are a member of the Southern Africa Rural Women's Assembly, a member of African Climate Justice Movement for Women, and again, a member of the African Women Climate Action Network. So I will be brief because most of the issues have been said out by by the other presenters. I also want to echo that women, we are at the forefront of the green transition and the catalyst for transformative justice in climate action. Especially rural women, we are already at the forefront of climate adaptation and resilience building, from leading sustainable agriculture hubs, reviving indigenous seed systems, to championing renewable energy projects in off-grid communities. As women, we are already offering homegrown, scalable solutions from wonder bags. We are creating wonder bags which are saving energy. We are building communally owned biogas stations. We are doing a lot of water harvesting, introducing new water harvesting technologies which are very sustainable. Also, we are also practicing what we call agroecology, which is improving soil and also doing land restoration. We are promoting and protecting indigenous seeds. We are doing seed banking and seed multiplication, and we are growing these seeds which are doing very well in harsh weather conditions. Women's leadership in this greening of the economy is grounded in lived experience of managing natural resources, water, food, and energy systems daily, and fundamental indigenous knowledge knowledge of ecosystems that is passed down through generations. We are getting this information from our mothers, and our mothers got the information from their mothers. Like what Professor Kaya said, that women, we are the custodian of the indigenous knowledge system. Yeah, I will be very, 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 I will try to be very quick because most of the issues have been said. But it's very unfortunate that despite these efforts and leadership that we have as women, we often remain underrepresented in decision-making platforms. And to unlock the full potential of just transition, women's leadership must be recognized, resourced, and institutionalized at all levels, that is local, national, and continental. Because as women, we are closer to nature and we play a very pivotal role in the management of natural resources. And also, we have a lot of untapped knowledge of nature, which can be harnessed for social economic development. Yeah, well, some of the key conversations that we need to have when we talk about gender or women's participation, we need to in just transition, we need to include issues like systemic inequality and care work. Somebody spoke about care work and the burden of care work on women. and also how has this burden, or how this burden can be exacerbated as we are transitioning. And we also need to speak about the issue of petromasculinity, looking at issues of power, misogyny, and how fossil fuels, oil, gas, and mining, which is a male-dominated industry, are protecting this at the expense of women and girls. And again, we also need to look at the issue of green colonialism, issue of eco-colonialism under the gist of environmental protection resulting in land grabbing, labor exploitation, carbon offsets initiatives, and issue of consent when it comes to land ownership and displacements. The issue of consent, we need to look at the issue of free, safe, prior informed consent, and how women and girls can be affected. A just transition must uphold the principles of free, prior, informed consent, that is FPIC, ensuring that women and girls are not only consulted but have the power to say no to harmful projects. Consent must be safe, accessible, and inclusive, considering the specific barriers women face. Specific barriers women face, and we also need to look at the issues of environmental and gender justice, and also how it is inseparable, and also to shift. Somebody spoke about the issue of top-down approach, patriarchal models. We need to look at them and try to introduce inclusive community-driven approaches that center care, equity, and leadership of women. Yeah, I'm rushing because the presentation is long. I'm trying to, and also to look at some of the barriers in advancing gender responsive climate policy and financing. Somebody spoke about lack of information and gender disaggregated data, systems barrier, financial systems bias. Most of the finances that are there are not going to women's projects, but are going to major projects that are owned by men. And then there are so many opportunities that are there that we can then leverage on. We have extreme funding drive, which can be given to women organizations, regional frameworks, and gender responsive budgeting. If we go along those, we may also ensure that the women's projects that I mentioned, that they have been tested, they're scalable. If we fund them, then we can then have we can be on our way to just transition. And then in terms of practical steps to ensure women's voices, needs, and innovations, we need to look at inclusive involvement of gender analysis in whatever we do. Let us do a lot of gender analysis, and we're also looking at movement building for amplification of women's voices in demanding just transition. And also we need to we have the knowledge. We need to start maybe documenting the knowledge, and also we need to come up with somebody spoke about we need to have data or knowledge that is supported. So we need to support data-driven advocates. For example, at Women and Land, what we are doing is costing the impact of climate change. We give it a monetary value. Say when the field that was full of a maize crop has been damaged by drought, what is the cost of that maize that was damaged? If a bridge was damaged, what is the cost to that community? So we need to give monetary value, and then we use that data for advocacy, and then we continue to advocate for participation of women in climate decision-making platforms at all levels. And also it's very key to support women's solutions, and also to listen and respect indigenous knowledge systems by localization, and not imposition of solutions or alternatives. Financial resources should be availed to support the scaling of women's tried and tested solutions such as growing of traditional seeds.
Tandiwe, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we almost running out of time. So if you could wrap up, I would really
Okay.
appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay. So I was trying to be very, very, very quick. And then in terms of practical steps, we need to support women's indigenous innovations. We need to grow and to growing and multiplication of traditional seeds that are working. There are so many that we can talk in terms of strengthening capacity and solidarity, building evidence-based accountability. Those are some of the things that we are doing at Women and Land in Zimbabwe and as the Rural Women's Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tandiwe. Sorry to rush you through. Kia, I would like to give you 1 second before I invite Alines Mumba from the Southern Africa Trust to just wrap up as we close our webinar. We're just slightly late by a few minutes. To you, just for 1 minute, Kia.
Okay, thank you. I just want to respond to Nompulelo's question.
Yeah.
She's asking what are the tools that I think should be implemented to support women in green enterprises. So in my speech, I mentioned hybrid tools, that financial tools. We need digital platforms where we can access market from e-commerce solutions, digital marketplaces for women-led green products. So if funding can also include such platforms. We also need green technology toolkits, access to solar kits, biodigesters, water irrigation systems, climate smart technologies. And that includes, as Metandiwa was saying just earlier, data and GIS tools to measure environmental impact, sustainability scorecards, and further taking it into network and marketing linkages. We need tools that can be able to help us to go to trade fairs and expos that expose us to the same people that are in the ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you, Kia. And just I noticed that Tabi from Delft in the Netherlands, who has asked a question in terms of the transition and how that it's resource intensive. I totally agree, Tabi, that for us to make this transition more sustainable long term, we cannot look at it as a project. It must be seen as a journey and a whole economy wide interventions that are required. What that needs is that the transition needs to be embedded in the local capacity systems and innovations as the main anchor of how we move with this transition. Otherwise, if we think about it as a project, then financing is always going to be an important challenge. And that's why we talk about this idea of how do you bring various stakeholders together? How do we embed these narratives within the systems using innovations, or not innovations, but existing capacities, norms, and knowledge, so that the interventions are not once off, but they're really embedded within the society and transformative in that regard. So it's not really a quick solution, but I think that it needs to be embedded in our own system to ensure that it's more sustainable long term. We are late by 1 minute. I would like to give this very last opportunity to Alines Mumba from on behalf of the Southern Africa Trust. Unfortunately, Miss Alice couldn't make it because she was caught up in another meeting. Alines, if you would like to unmute yourself and make the concluding remarks before we wind out this webinar.
Thank you very much, Mao. Can you hear me?
Yeah, clearly I can hear you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks to our speakers for sharing their extensive expertise and their experiences and their perspectives on what is required for us to sort of drive a successful, just transition. I'd also like to thank the participants for their rich engagement. I can see there are a lot of questions that we haven't been able to get around to. But again, this is a platform and this is a journey that we're walking together. So I think this dialogue and discussion will continue beyond today's webinar. Just a few reflections in the short time that we have before we close. I mean, we were reminded during this webinar that really issues of trust, use of local language and indigenous knowledge, as well as recognition of care work and paid care work are successful things that issues that we need to be mindful of, and they're critical for the success of an inclusive, just transition. We also heard from Kia that, access to financing and access to information and capacity building continue to be a challenge for young people. So how can we then, through our own respective efforts, push for and advocate for more responsive financing that is accessible to local communities, women and youth? Beyond that, we need to be thinking about how, as we define our interventions and efforts, how decolonized are they? How feminist and equitable are those processes that we're, embarking on as we seek to meaningfully engage with local communities, particularly women and youth, in their respective diversities? So at the Trust, we're really deliberate about strengthening or implementing interventions that seek to strengthen local communities. And we believe that anything that is targeted at local communities must start with co-creation that ensures sustainability, ownership, and shared responsibility. And especially in this shifting ecosystem that we're currently in, as development actors in the climate space, we are seeing a dwindling funding pool towards our efforts. We really need that concerted effort, working with the communities and co-creating sustainable interventions. As we were reminded earlier, local communities have been adapting and adopting resilient adaptive practices. So really, they are the best placed actors to drive interventions. And as we take a forward-looking perspective on what the platform looks like for the SIT intervention, which is not just a project, it's not a project for us, it's beyond that, it's a platform. We strongly believe that this platform offers strategic opportunities for us to elevate grassroots voices into national and regional dialogue processes on the just energy transition for it to be more inclusive. It provides a space for us to experiment, to learn, to co-create models that really are relevant for local communities across Southern Africa and the spaces that we're working in. And we also see this platform as a vehicle for fostering regional solidarity by connecting movements at community level. So whether they are formalized or non-formalized, different formations, networks, and local innovations across the regions. So really, we look forward to the next steps as we prioritize for this platform and for this initiative, a deepening of community participation through co-designing and not really just consulting, but rather co-designing interventions. We are looking forward to how best, through our efforts, in partnership with you colleagues, we can then capture and share local practices, innovations, and success stories that can shift policies within our jurisdictions and within the ecosystem. We really look forward to building partnerships across the ecosystem, as well as advocating for funding mechanisms that are accessible, adaptive, and anchored in community priorities. So with that, I'd like all of you to continue walking with us on this journey. Your continued engagement and collaboration really will be key for making this just transition inclusive and community-led. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alines, for wrapping this up very nicely. I'm sure we'll all agree that the extra 7 minutes that we went beyond the scheduled time was all worth it. So thank you so much for being my fellow agitator in this space and collaborator. Like you said, we don't see this as a project, we don't see this as an initiative between two organizations, but we see this as a platform for all of us to co-create. So you have taken the first step by participating in this webinar. We will get back to you seeking opportunities for collaboration, for co-creation, so that we can take this to the next level. And on that note, I would like to thank wholeheartedly my fellow panelists for making this an awesome webinar, and to you, the participants, for your comments, for your engagement, for listening to us this afternoon. And on that note, I would like to just say, thank you so much, and this is the end of our day. Much appreciated.